Today we're going to take a tour of the thoracic cavity, and the thoracic cavity will include organs like the trachea, the bronchi, lungs, heart, and we'll even take another look at the esophagus in this lesson. Now, the respiratory system does work in conjunction with the cardio system. The respiratory system is responsible for the exchange of gases in the body, so oxygen and carbon dioxide exchange. And so it's getting rid of CO2 at the lungs and taking in oxygen that we breathe. And the cardiovascular system works as a big pump because it includes the heart. The heart is the pump, and it's pumping the blood around the body, and that's transporting the carbon dioxide out of the body and transporting the oxygen into the body. So they work in conjunction with each other because one is exchanging gases and the other is taking those gases and transporting them around the body. So today we're going to take a look at the larynx on this slide. And the larynx is located at the cranial end of the trachea, so at the top of the trachea, and it's located right here. So this is the larynx. And if we were to cut the larynx in half, you would be able to see the vocal cords. The vocal cords are housed in the larynx, and it's what allows humans to speak, but animals to make the various noises that they make. The air passes through the larynx into the trachea, which we talked about in the digestive system, but we're going to talk quickly about it again. Remember, it's made of cartilaginous rings, and it moves air from the larynx down into bronchi and then into the lungs. And those cartilage rings keep the windpipe open and allow it not to collapse. And then you can see the probe is pulling the esophagus. And remember, that's dorsal to the trachea and made of muscles. So those are the things that you need to be made aware of in this photograph. And here's just a close-up of the larynx. The probe is kind of pointing right to it. And there I go again, forgetting to put my pen on. There's the larynx. And then right below that, you can see a close-up of the trachea, and you can really get a good look at those cartilage rings that make up the trachea. Now, if we follow the trachea caudally, meaning going towards the tail, it's going to split into a right and left bronchi, and they are going to enter the right and left lungs. So you can sort of see that here in this picture. The trachea splits into the right and left bronchi, which then go into the right and left lung. Here you can see the lungs have been removed from the mink, and you'll notice that the lungs of the mink have actually one more lobe on the right lung when compared to the human body. So the right lung of a mink has 4 lobes and the left lung has 2. In a human, the right lung has 3 lobes and the left has 2 lobes. In the right lung of a mink, we have the cranial, medial, caudal, and accessory lobe. Cranial would be right here towards the head. Caudal is going to be down here. Let me just label those for you. And then we have the medial lobe, which is in the middle. That makes sense. And then we have the accessory lobe. There's no accessory lobe in the humans. Okay, so there's accessory. So that is the right lung. On the left lung, we only have the cranial and caudal. So cranial, again, would be at the top, and caudal at the bottom going towards the tail. Also, something that you need to be aware of is the reason that there are less lobes on the left lung is because the left lung houses the heart. It takes up space on the left side of the thoracic cavity, so there's less lobes on the left lung than on the right, because there's something called the cardial notch on the left lung, and that cardial notch is where the heart is housed. So that's the difference between the right and left lungs, and it's exactly the same in the humans. We have a cardiac notch on the left side as well, and that is where a majority of the heart sits in that notch. And I'm bringing up the diaphragm again. You can kind of see this. I believe this is the same picture I used in the digestive system, but it's this muscle that's separating the thoracic cavity from the digestive cavity, and it's actually very unique to mammals. All mammals have a diaphragm. It's caudal to the lungs, and meaning it's below the lungs, more towards the tail as we're moving down the body of the mink. When the diaphragm contracts, it moves down, so it's going to move down. It's going to make the thoracic cavity larger, and air is going to rush into the lungs. When it relaxes, it moves back up into its original position. The thoracic cavity gets smaller, and so air rushes out of the lungs. And that's how the lungs and the diaphragm work together to allow air to rush in and air to rush out. It has a little bit to do with Boyle's law as well, and pressure differences between atmospheric pressure and the pressure of the lungs. I'm not going to get into that in this particular lesson, but Boyle's law does take effect in the breathing mechanism in mink and also in humans. The only part of the cardiovascular system that we are going to look at is the heart. And you can see that they've pulled, in this picture, they've pulled away the lungs, and you can see this big muscular organ that is the heart. If you were able to feel the lungs and also feel and touch the heart, you would notice that the lungs are going to be very soft and spongy, and the heart is very muscular, very dense. That's because the lungs are made of a lot of air pockets and alveoli where gas exchange is occurring, so they're very light. They would actually float on water. If you cut a portion of the lung off and you put it in a beaker of water, it would float. So it's less dense. The heart, very, very muscular. Remember, this is pumping blood throughout your body, and so it needs to be very muscular to put pressure on the blood to push the blood out into your body. So very, very muscular, very, very dense. So it's really the only thing that we are going to look at as far as cardiovascular system. I urge you to look at the videos that are posted on the class page, because it's, again, live action shots of somebody dissecting a mink. And they're actually cute because it's a younger set of children and they make funny comments if you've watched some of the other ones. And you'll be able to see the heart. The teacher who's doing the dissection takes the pericardial sac off of the heart. You can kind of see it's still intact on this heart, and it's a very thin layer of connective tissue that covers and protects the heart. And so you get to see that being removed from the heart. So that finishes out the respiratory system. I urge you to read the respiratory system lab reading. It's found in the lab manual folder, just like all of the other readings that you've had to do. It'll help you answer the journal questions. And there's short video clips of the dissection of the thoracic cavity found on the class page. I urge you to watch those. Again, they're very short. Most of them are a minute or less, for you to kind of just see live action shots of that dissection. And again, please try not to get too far behind on your journal. If you keep up with it on a daily basis, it's less that you'll have to do when the journal is due on the 22nd. I give you to the 24th to submit. And that's it for the respiratory system. Our next lesson will be the excretory system.